The United States once built more ships than the entire world combined. Not slightly more, not competitively more than everyone else combined. At one point, they were launching one ship every single day. Think about that for a second. An entire ocean-going vessel, designed, assembled, and launched every day. That's not just industrial power, that's dominance. But today, the United States can barely compete in shipbuilding, because somehow, over the last few decades, the entire global shipbuilding industry was taken over by just 3 countries. And the reason why is not what you think. In 2018, one of the largest American container ships was launched in Philadelphia. It was impressive, massive, a symbol that the US still had the capability. But at the exact same time, shipyards in South Korea were building vessels 5 times larger. Not just larger, but faster, more efficiently, more consistently. So here's the real question. Which country do you think dominates shipbuilding today? Because what actually happened here didn't just change one industry, it reshaped global trade itself. The big myth. Most people think they already know the answer. Asia won because of cheap labor. It sounds logical. Lower wages, lower costs, stronger competition. But that explanation is misleading. Because on a $200 million ship, labor only accounts for about $10 million. That's roughly 5%. The rest? Steel, engines, electronics, logistics, time. And time is the most expensive part of all, because delays don't just cost money, they disrupt entire supply chains. So if labor isn't the deciding factor, then what is? The real advantage. Asia didn't win because they were cheaper, they won because they were more efficient, more organized, and most importantly, they built systems that could scale. Western shipyards stayed relatively small, focused on specialized builds, custom work, limited output. But Asia took a completely different approach. They built massive shipyards, industrialized production, standardized processes. They treated shipbuilding like manufacturing, not craftsmanship. And that changed everything. Because once you standardize production, you reduce time. And once you reduce time, you reduce cost. The US Golden Era. But what makes this story even more surprising is where it started. Because the United States didn't begin from weakness, it began from absolute dominance. During World War II, the US became the greatest shipbuilding force in history. Between 1941 and 1945, they built more ships than the rest of the world combined, and not by a small margin, 6 times more. At peak production, they were launching a new ship every single day. Entire fleets appeared almost overnight. Factories were converted into shipyards. Processes were streamlined to the extreme. Everything was optimized for speed, because the goal wasn't profit. The goal was survival. And for that moment in time, the United States was unstoppable. The collapse after success. But then the war ended, and everything changed, because suddenly there were too many ships, thousands of them, flooding the market. Companies didn't need new ships anymore. They could buy used ones, cheap, available, ready to go. So demand disappeared, almost instantly. And when demand disappears in an industrial sector, the decline isn't gradual. It's immediate. Shipyards shut down, workers left, infrastructure was abandoned, and the system that once produced ships at record speed stopped. Japan's opportunity. But while the US slowed down, Japan was just getting started. After World War II, Japan needed to rebuild its economy, and shipbuilding became a strategic focus. With support from the United States, Japan invested heavily in infrastructure, technology, training. Then came the Korean War, and suddenly there was demand again. Ships needed repairs, maintenance, upgrades, and Japan was ready. They became the go-to solution, and that gave them something incredibly powerful: experience, revenue, momentum. While others were recovering, Japan was advancing. The feedback loop. And then something even more important happened. Japan didn't just build ships, they optimized the entire ecosystem. They started building larger vessels, which reduced shipping costs per unit. Lower costs made global trade more efficient, which increased demand for shipping, which increased demand for ships, and that demand fed directly back into production. This created a feedback loop, a system that kept reinforcing itself. Each improvement made the next one easier. Each success created the foundation for the next, and once that cycle started, it became almost impossible for competitors to catch up. The financing revolution. But Japan had one more advantage, and this one changed everything. Financing. They made ships easier to buy. Low-interest loans, small upfront payments, government-backed guarantees. Instead of requiring massive capital, they lowered the barrier to entry. And that opened the market. More companies could afford ships. More demand entered the system. More ships were built. And that growth accelerated everything else, because shipbuilding isn't just about construction, it's about access. And Japan made access easier than anyone else. The shift to Korea and China. Then came the next shift. South Korea entered the market, and they didn't just compete, they scaled even further. Bigger shipyards, faster production, more aggressive expansion. Then China followed, with massive state support, unlimited scale, and long-term industrial planning. Together, these countries transformed shipbuilding into something else entirely. Not just an industry, but a strategic advantage. The modern dominance. Today, 3 countries dominate global shipbuilding: China, South Korea, and Japan. And their dominance isn't accidental. To compete in shipbuilding today, you need 4 things: industrial scale, government support, export infrastructure, and direct access to oceans. Miss one of these, and you fall behind. Miss 2, and you're out of the game. And that's exactly what happened to most of the world. Did the West really lose? But here's where the story becomes more nuanced. Because the West didn't completely lose, it shifted. Instead of building entire ships, it focused on high-value components: engines, navigation systems, automation technology, precision engineering. These are the parts that require expertise, innovation, intellectual property. And that's where a large portion of profit exists. So while Asia dominates production, the West still plays a critical role, just in a different part of the value chain. The truth about shipbuilding profits. And here's the part most people don't expect. Shipbuilding itself isn't extremely profitable. Margins are thin, competition is intense, delays are costly, and risks are high. These massive ships look like they generate huge profits, but they don't. Asian shipyards win through volume. They build more, faster, at scale. The West wins through value. Specialized systems, advanced components, higher margins, different strategy, same industry. This isn't just a story about ships, it's a story about how industries evolve, how dominance can disappear, and how systems matter more than strength. Because the United States didn't lose because it couldn't build. It lost because the world changed. And others adapted faster. They built bigger systems, stronger feedback loops, more scalable operations. And once that shift happened, there was no easy way back. And here's the crazy part. Even today, these ships look like they print money. Massive, powerful, essential to global trade. But in reality, they might be one of the worst businesses in the world, and that's a completely different story.